Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to your weekly ONECAST podcast. In this particular episode of the ONECAST podcast, I'm Raymond, and in this episode, I'm going to be hosting together with my co-host right here, Devito. Would you mind saying hi to the audience?
Hi, my name is Devito, and I'm very honored to also co-host this podcast with Raymond.
All right. So in this particular episode, we've got a very special guest. We've got a very special guest who is an alumni of SMAC 1, and he's currently studying in Berlin, Germany. Please welcome Ko Genessaret.
So I'm Genessaret Kharistio Tjusila. I'm an alumni of SMUKI from the class of 2017. People usually call me Gen in Germany, or Indonesian usually call me Ko Gene. I'm right now 21 and studying mathematics at the Technical University of Berlin. So my main interest in study, my main field of study is artificial intelligence, and especially like the mathematics that is operating behind artificial intelligence. My hobbies is, when I'm not doing like my main study, is reading. I read science book, philosophy book, and also theology book mainly. So that's my reading diet, so to say. But other than that, I'm mostly doing my bachelor thesis right now. So I'm working for my bachelor thesis this semester in artificial intelligence.
That's indeed very amazing of you. Ko Gen. Yes, I'm just going to call you Ko Gen. It's going to be okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Ko Gene is also a very capable individual, and Ko Gene can speak a multitude of languages. I'd like to ask you a question, Ko Gene. How many questions can you speak fluently, and probably include a few phrases with it?
So clearly I speak Bahasa and English.
Yeah.
Those are two languages that I think most SMAC 1 students learn as a part of the national curriculum. Other than that, I speak fluent German because that's my study language. It's very weird for me to say something, but let's try. Like, ich spreche auf Deutsch. That's a bit of my language background. All of them are, so my English and my German are both, so to say, like C1 level, which is like IELTS band 8 level-ish in IELTS term.
That is a respectable score in English. That's very respectable. I give you that. That's nice.
Okay, so regarding your experience studying German, when did you firstly start to learn German, and what was the reason of you learning German?
So I started learning German when I was like a 10th grader. That was like part of I think part of the curriculum at that time. I'm not really sure if that's still right now, that we need to take at least one foreign language, either that being German, Mandarin, or Japanese in SMUKI. And also we need to take a lintas minat subject, that is economic or English. So I take German as part of my language, as a language course at that time. Was I really that serious about learning it? I will say no. Sufficient to say I'm quite bad at it. When I was 10th grader, I remember going to remedials for German class, so most funnest thing I have, like at 10th grade. It was at 11th grade, so it was like the first semester of 11th grade, coming to the second semester, that I decided I want to study in Germany. And since then I started taking German course at Goethe Institute at that time. Was I then good at German after taking Goethe courses? Not so much. I still end up in a lot of remedials class, and even Frau Ratna kind of teased me at one point, asking like why did I still go to remedial even if after taking Goethe courses. So so for the most part of my high school life, I wasn't that serious about learning German. It started getting serious after I finished my high school study. So if you study in German, typically you will have like a gap between your graduation, which is like in May, and your departure, which is usually in January. So that's the 6-month gap. That's where I really start developing my German skill. It's not from zero per se, but it's at a relatively. I started it nearly at the beginning when I graduated from SMAC 1. So the curriculum that we have in SMAC 1 is, as long as I know it at my time at that time, is A1 level. So A1, we say it in Germany. It's still very far off from what you need to study in Germany. So that's still like at least 2 or 3 level more before you can enter a college. And then after you enter a college, there's another 2 or 3 level before you can enter a university. So that's like very far from what you need to really enter for a degree in Germany.
Wow. Okay, I see there, Ko. It's actually pretty nice in basically hearing the process of you learning a new language. Speaking of the process though, Kogen, what are the ups and downs during the learning process? And speaking of which, how did you overcome the downs that you stated just now?
I think before like talking about what are the ups and downs, it's important to first recognize what are the difficulty of a particular language, which I learned. And I think for most of us, English and Indonesia kind of come naturally. Most of us who are in Smuki. So German is, I think, for me, kind of a very unique language in terms of learning process, because that's the only language that I learned when I'm already like an adult. I started learning English relatively early at my relatively early age. And I think being a language, German has several points of difficulty, which are quite unique. For example, German nouns have what we call gender to them. So we have der, die, das, which masculine, feminine, or neutrum gender. That is quite a burden to memorize. I think also in comparison to the English that we typically use, German language have a lot more structure to it. How the words are supposed to be ordered, which comes first, and there are more rules of syntax that are associated with German language than with other language. So those two are mainly the most difficult part of learning German. Another thing that I think is pretty difficult is obviously amassing the vocabulary that is needed to learn a language. Obviously, things like Duolingo oftentimes help, but not so much, right? Because for a language to really be functional, I think there's a research somewhere that I read that for a language to be functional, you need to memorize like at least 500 to 1,000 words to really be able to use that language. So I think amassing the vocabulary is also something difficult. One of my friends did, and it doesn't personally work for me, but I think it works for him perfectly, is like have a mini notebook. So he would usually carry a small notebook around, and every day he would write like 10 words in that notebook, and then he would like open it in every break time that he have, right? So like he would open it at morning, he would then open it in the middle of the day, and then the afternoon. And so by the time each night, he already memorized 10 new vocabularies, which I think is amazing. Another way I usually overcome the difficulty of learning vocabulary in batch is usually through reading and writing. I personally find it easiest to memorize vocabularies when and the genders also when seeing them in context in which they are used. So I read books, I write essays, I also hear people speak. Of course, I did not understand all of the words that they use initially, but it kind of like it reached a level where I basically just memorized the phrases in which they use, without necessarily knowing each of the word, what does each of the word means. But it's usually for me easier to memorize things in a particular context and thus in particular phrase, in as a phrase directly.
Okay, Ko Gene, I think from what we've seen before in what you said before, it can be seen that you studied very hard and you studied very well to actually be able to understand and also have a very good understanding towards this kind of this language, especially when learning German. There's so many cases for nouns, or there's cases for like der, wie, das, masculine, feminine, neutral, that kind of thing, and so on. So sometimes learning a new language can be quite stressful for us. How can you find a motivation to overcome that? Especially, can you please connect this into your experience of you mentioned before that you graduated at May and then at January you had to fly into German to start your college. Can you explain what you find really stressful in that 6 months term, or even longer than that, perhaps when you studied in the student college in German?
I think you mentioned a point there. Basically, the pressure of needing to learn a language in 6 months, because I of course need to get to a particular university by January, kind of act as a motivation, like the fear of not getting any student college, kind of act as a motivation in learning the language. Another motivation that I think, another thing that I also find useful and helpful is the fact that during those 6 months, I especially dedicated myself to learning that particular language. So I think this is a common difficulty that most of us have. Like when in schools, we only study German like once a week in class. I find it particularly difficult because I didn't train a lot, but really having 6 months in which I really focus all of my time to study that specific language is particularly helpful for me. That's why I also kind of see that there are probably certain benefits if you take a specific break, and for example, like if you go to on a specific trip, like for example for 3 months into a particular country, which language you want to learn. For example, if I want to study Chinese, then it probably makes sense for me to like spend 3 months at just going to China to learn the language. I find it particularly motivating. But in terms of what I would recommend when I'm learning like for personal use, like as a hobby, I think that having dedicated time every day, like for example in the evening, to really only work on materials that are specifically in that language, so not access any materials that are not related to that language, is very helpful, because that kind of like establish a specific mental space for you, where for that time, like for example from 7 to 8 p.m. I only read and write and speak and listen to things which are German. I find it particularly helpful to create that isolated space rather than it being intertwined in my life, which oftentimes results in confusion. So I think that and the other benefit of having like a specific time is that it motivates you to be disciplined. So rather than relying on your motivations to really learn on the language, you are relying more on your discipline to really keep that habit of dedicated time. So at one point, I also think that you want to do that even if you're not motivated, and so at least even if you don't learn anything, you I bet you would learn something even if you're like extremely tired that day or not really not in the mood. So that's how I would overcome the power of motivation.
All right, Ko. What a process have you been through? And yeah, that is amazing. Like in 6 months, uh, you can basically speak German. You can basically speak German quite fluently already to get into college in Germany, right? Also, Kogan, since since you're an individual who can be considered a trilingual, what are the advantages of being able to speak more than one foreign language according to your experience?
Yeah. So I think one of the most benefits for me is definitely because I need to study in German. So that's like a clear benefit that I need to have that I get from being able to speak three language. But I think for a more inclusive answer, what is the benefit for people to learn many language? I think one of my best answer to that would be because I find that there are many concepts, and I think this is particularly useful when you come not in science, because like generally we don't really care about language in science, like in maths, but particularly when it comes to humanities studies. So in philosophy and religion in particular, like what I study in particular, it's oftentimes useful to be able to speak in another language, because oftentimes there are certain concepts which are more clear in another language. So it's either that there are a word that is more representative towards that particular concept that you're talking about, or oftentimes it's easier to formulate your thoughts better when you're studying in another language, when you're using different language. Another thing which I actually find very useful when studying particularly philosophy is the fact that I can access primary literature. So generally we live in a world where works in philosophy are mostly translated from German to English. One of the benefits that I have being a German-speaking person is I can directly access the literature that I refer to. So, and I think it's particularly important. This is, I think, one of the characteristics of languages where syntax, in particular in social fields, syntax is very important. And I think being able to see different translations of that particular quote help us to really understand more the context in which the writer writes and the meaning that the writers want to convey through those writings. So I think that's the benefit of being able to study more language. And also I think in terms of practicalities, I figure that after learning German, I write better in English, right? Because German being a more structured language with a lot of rules allow me to really better be more concise in my writing in English and be like more rigorous in terms of my formulations. So I think that's also a habit that is built when you're learning other language.
Wow, Ko Genessaret, that is so impressive. I think what you've said, like reading the primary literature directly in the German language, is very, what can I say? It's very realistic. It's quite interesting to hear that, especially if you can directly read the books written by, for example, Hegel or Immanuel Kant or Wittgenstein, that kind of thing. So yeah. So to summarize this, Ko Genessaret has given us so many answers and delightful thoughts towards learning more languages. So to end this, we want to thank you, Ko Genessaret, for giving his wonderful thoughts and answers towards this. And yeah, that's it, guys. So thank you for witnessing our podcast. We hope that we can keep giving you this kind of useful contents for you all towards in the future. Don't forget to also follow our podcast ONECAST 10 by following our Instagram page in the Smokey, and also by watching it directly in the YouTube channel. So yeah, thank you guys, and see you all soon.